Hello, this is Justin Trollinger from EIL Ecuador, and thank you for watching the next video in our series, Listening and Reading, Planning for Student Understanding. Now, I know in our last video, Adeline talked you through some ideas to keep in mind and interesting concepts for what to think about when you're choosing material. Now, in this video, we're going to look at what we might start doing with that material once we have it chosen. So the first thing that we want to think about is what is our objective here? Now, obviously, if we're talking about listening and reading, the overall goal is comprehension. But in order to think about comprehension, when we talk about objectives, I want to emphasize that it's not just comprehension, but the students have to show comprehension in some way. So I have prepared 4 different classes for this video, and I want to start by showing you my objectives. So this is for a class that I did on a news program. And this is for one about an article from the modules from the Ministry of Education about how soccer uniforms have changed through history. And then here we have one about a listening from the Ministry of Education modules. And finally, another one about a short story by Edgar Allan Poe that I wrote a class about. So you can see here that each of these objectives focuses not just on student understanding, but on the way that students are going to show us that they understand. So looking at what we're going to be doing with this material, we're just going to line it up in a very simple framework that I call pre, during, and post. So for each piece of material, I'm going to plan a different class with a pre-stage. The pre-stage is when the students get ready to read or get ready to listen. With a during stage, where students do several activities as they're reading or as they're listening. And finally, with a post stage, which is where they make personal connections or connections to their real life or connections to their language learning with what they have read or listened to. So this pre, during, and post framework is how we will be planning out some lessons very quickly. So let's look at the first one. So my first lesson is based on an article called The History of Soccer Uniforms from the Ministry of Education modules, Decimo, Module 1. And my objective is that students will show comprehension of the article by describing in their own words the changes through the history of soccer uniforms. So you can see here, this is the article taken from the Ministry of Education text. And this is my lesson plan. First, they'll share their ideas about their favorite football teams just to get ready. And then we have 3 different activities they will do as they read. And notice that each activity gets a little more difficult. Finally, if we have time, they'll work in pairs and design a uniform for their favorite football team. So notice that we have multiple readings, multiple reading activities, and the post for me is not so essential, but it's only if there's time. Now let's look at my next lesson plan, which is about the News Now 5 Minutes News program. The objective that I chose for this lesson is that students will be able to show comprehension of the news program by writing down the details in an outline of the program. And just to show you the material, you can use this link and get 5-minute news programs all day, every day. And now I would like to just play a little of the news
Support
program
for NPR and the following
and northwestern
so
Oklahoma.
that you can hear what
Households that do not want to interact with a census worker at their front door can still fill out a census form online, on paper, or over the phone. The census helps determine each community's share of some
Is that enough to give you an idea what the news program sounded like? So that is what we'll be using as we look at this lesson plan. So again, it's a pre, during, and post. We have a very short 5-minute pre-stage guessing what happens next. And then this time we have 4 during activities, each one aimed at this news program. And then if there's time, they will plan their own 5-minute news program about Ecuador. Moving on now to my next lesson plan. This one is called Meeting an Old Friend, and it's based on a listening from the Ministry of Education module Segundo de Bachillerato, Module 1. It's the 3rd page. And the objective of this lesson is that students will show understanding of the audio Meeting an Old Friend by making a list of the changes that are important in the lives of these two people. You can see here the page from the module, and I'm going to play you just a little bit of the audio to give you an idea what it sounds like.
Page 3. Stephen, is that you?
Selena, hello. What are you doing?
Well, Steve Dunn. How have you been?
Good. Great, actually. How are you? I haven't seen you for how long?
It's been ages. At least 10 years. Wow.
Yeah, wow. So what are you doing here?
Sorry.
All right. Now, if that was enough to give you an idea what we're looking at, let's go ahead and look at the lesson plan. So again, we have a pre, during, and post structure with a slightly longer pre-activity, but still relatively short, and then 4 during activities, each one getting a little deeper until we get to the last during, which is that they will write the main changes in the lives of these two people. That's really my objective. And then finally, in the post activity, if there's time, the students will identify the verb tense used in the audio, which is the present perfect, and then they will have a similar conversation about meeting an old friend in pairs. This is the only one of the lessons I planned for today that actually has a grammar topic as well as the receptive skill of listening or reading. And I think that makes it a little extra interesting. Then we'll look at my 4th lesson, which is one that's based on a real piece of literature, the story A Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. So the objective of this one is that students will be able to show comprehension of the story A Cask of Amontillado by answering questions about the relationship between the people. So again, pre, during, and post. We have a short pre, 3 during activities, getting deeper and deeper into the reading at least 3 times, and finally, an interesting post where they get the chance to, if there's time, write an alternative ending for the story. So these 4 different lesson plans are intended just to give you an idea of what we can do with the material we choose for listening and reading classes. They're very simple outlines, but I have used these in real life, most of them, and they can be lessons that work quite well. So as you're continuing to plan listening and reading lessons, or continuing to watch this video series, I'm just going to encourage you again to think about the pre, during, and post structure. Pre is where they get ready to read or to listen. During is where they really read or listen, and they do it multiple times, and they have a clear activity each time that they do it. and finally the post where they make connections with what they read or listened. So I hope this structure is getting a little clearer. In subsequent videos, we're going to explore it in even more depth. So I just want to say then, thank you for joining us for listening and reading, planning for student understanding, and I will see you in future videos. Thank you.